Imagine the biggest fear you had to overcome when you decided to bet on yourself and take that first step into entrepreneurship. True, being an entrepreneur can be exhausting, lonely, frustrating, and terrifying, but it's worth every drop of blood, sweat, and tears when you are pursuing your passion and turning your dream into reality. Welcome to PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by Jess Schultz. Topic: everything you need to know about go-to-market strategies. Episode 170 starts here. Let me remind you. This is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to this hustle because empathy is my module. And empathy is critical when you are building your go-to-market strategy. Now let's go back to our topic. Join us for an inspiring Positivity Hack delivered episode with Jess Schultz, a dynamic entrepreneur, go-to-market strategist, and mentor to startups. Jess has built a thriving business by mastering sales and marketing strategies while making bold career pivots and betting on herself to create a unique path to success. In this episode, you will explore how to craft effective go-to-market strategies and overcome the fear of starting a business and the art of career reinvention and storytelling to spark interest. If you've ever dreamed of starting your own business or making a career leap but felt stuck, this conversation will leave you fired up and ready to take action. Jess, let's start with a simple question. Where are you joining this recording from?
Miami, Florida.
Beautiful location, not far away from where I am at the moment, Turks and Caicos. It's about less than 2 hours flight, and I believe it's a lovely weather with you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful here right now.
Let's take this leap of faith and leave us with positivity hacks. So, just tell us how you pivoted, how you reinvented yourself when you had to make that first leap.
I've done it a few times now, but the first one was I started my career in capital markets. So I worked in banking with institutional investors, and I did that for almost a decade. And my heart wasn't in it anymore. It was a very misogynist culture, and I just really wanted something different. Um, so I think sometimes pivots are best managed with like a sidestep. So the way that I did that personally was I went from working at a bank to working for a technology company that sold software to banks. And so that was a nice, kind of sidestep for me where I was still working with the same audience. My experience was all still relevant, but it was giving me exposure to selling software and to working at a tech company, which was quite different than working at a bank. So I did that for a bit just to kind of get that tech sales experience under my belt. And then intentionally, I pivoted out of banking and like trading world altogether after that. So my next move was to another software company where I sold HR services and software to small businesses. And I was selling primarily like as a channel sales strategy through venture capital and private equity. So built an entirely new network from scratch. That wasn't a network that I had exposure to before, and really, really enjoyed it. And I got recruited actually by a venture capital fund to join them as a result of that job. So pivoted once again back to investor, but this time private markets, like very different. I did that for about a year and really enjoyed it, but I just decided that as much as I enjoyed it, I missed being an operator. I missed being more like in the weeds of building a business. But that experience at the VC really gave me an opportunity to learn that there was a real need in the market with startups, that there wasn't really I think like a good solution to help them with their go-to-market sales and marketing. And so I built that. So basically, I started my company 3 years ago now called Amplify, and that was my final pivot for now.
Final Pivot Amplify Group has been for quite a while, and actually, you approached me with the strategy that you pitch to other startups, which is amplify your own voice via going to podcasts, right?
Yep. Yep. It's one of the strategies. Yep.
So
Exactly.
let's go into that. Why do you believe it's a good strategy to have?
Yeah. So I think for startups, for my clientele, I think it's a really great strategy because they are new and young businesses. So they're not the brand name of their company, kind of like my company, Amplify Group. That's not as well known as Salesforce or Nike is, right? And so when you don't have that brand recognition for your company, I think you really need to, or you should really lean into your personal brand. And this still can be impactful even when you're a bigger company, but for startups, it's kind of like the best tool in their toolkit. Because even though Amplify Group doesn't have brand recognition, Jessica Schultz does, or Beta Young does. So I encourage startup founders to really lean into their personal brand and elevate their own voice because their company brand doesn't have that clout yet. And I think that helps in many ways. One, messages from individuals get on average 500% more engagement than messages from companies, right? Because it's people connect with people. And so it's just a more effective message. I think it also allows them to get in front of more of their target audience in a really cost effective way, because for startups too, like they don't have these massive budgets to run, really expensive ad campaigns or anything like that. So for the most part, this is a very low cost, high impact strategy to like pitch yourself. Most shows, if they do accept you, you don't pay anything to be on the show. So it's a great way to get your voice out there, to spread awareness, for people to get to know you on a personal level, again at a very low cost. And when I've been able to get clients on the right show where like their target audience is like the primary audience of that show, sometimes on the very next day we can see like a number of inbound leads come in as a result. So it's just like, yeah, I think a really great way to elevate personal brand and very cost effective way to spread brand awareness.
That's also one of the topics we talked to our previous guest when he talked about SEO, because building backlinks and
Yep,
actually
that too.
by building voice and online presence is critical. Right. So what's the most common mistake startups make when developing a go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I think from the actual strategy, there's a few mistakes they make, some on the strategy, some on the execution, or like more common mistakes that I see. On the strategy side, I think it's not spending the time to get the fundamentals right. So in my mind, there's really three fundamental elements that should be should have intentional effort and time invested in. And if you get those fundamentals right, the rest of it is 10 times easier. Like we're going downhill, so to speak. So the three foundational elements are: who are you targeting? So who is your ideal customer profile, and who's your buyer persona? And I think on that point, a lot of startups just start off too broad. So if you ask them, who's your ICP? A lot of them will say enterprise. And if you're a small company with less than a million or even less than 5 million, enterprise is too broad. You need to get much more specific, which might look like we're targeting companies that are enterprise grade. We're defining that as 10,000 or more employees. We're looking for companies located in the United States that are in these three industries and that are using Salesforce. I'm just giving like a generic example, but like getting that specific about who you're targeting is really important. And I think not enough people spend enough time really getting specific there. So that's one. And that's so important because it drives so many other aspects of your sales and marketing. The other one is positioning. So really spending time to really understand and articulate how you are truly different, like what your true unique value proposition is and how you're going to articulate that to the market. That is so important, and not a lot of companies really spend time getting their positioning right. And both of those things I should mention are evergreen, right? It's not set it and forget it. It's set it, do the work, and then the market moves or your customers move or you get different feedback, and those things need to continue to evolve. They're more of a verb than a noun, but regardless, you need to spend the time. And then the third foundational element is brand. So a lot of startups I work with will be trying to sell into really large organizations, but if you go to their website or you look at their other brand collateral, it looks very immature. And it's going to be unlikely that you're going to close really large enterprise customers if you look like you can't handle large enterprise customers, right? Like there is so much of perception is reality, whether we like it or not. And so like you have to look the part. And so I would say like those are the three things that not enough startups, I guess, appreciate. And a lot of them just don't know what they don't know and don't spend the time to really refine. And so then their subsequent like sales and marketing efforts, I think, fall flat because those foundational elements weren't refined enough.
So you had a privilege of working with many startups, so you knew how to avoid some of the mistakes. But
Mm-hmm.
can you talk about your mistakes? What was your biggest mistake when you started your journey as a Amplify Group CEO?
Yeah. Um, it's like hard to say a mistake because I think they're all learning experiences, even for startups, right? But I would say like the thing I've struggled with the most, and maybe that's like the better way to say it, in my opinion, is staffing, like just finding the right people to scale my business with me and scale it beyond myself. I think that's a little bit more challenging for me because it's a services business and because it's a bootstrapped business. So I don't have a lot of cash to make mistakes, which is a blessing and a curse. I think like that's a blessing and a curse of building a bootstrapped business. It forces you to make really tough decisions fast, and it forces you to be more, I don't know what the right word is, like intentional with each move that you make. But that's been my biggest challenge, is just finding the right people. And again, we're providing a service, so it's a little bit different than when you're building a software. But talent is hard, I think, regardless, for every company. So yeah, that's been my biggest challenge.
So you're providing a service. That means that sometimes you may have a lot of clients and other times it may just dry up.
Yeah, and it just makes it hard to move it beyond myself, right? Because um, people, as I say, people are less predictable than software, right? Like if we buy HubSpot or something, we know more or less exactly what we're getting. When I hire someone to write copy or to work with a client, I interview them, I do reference checks, of course, but then at the end of the day, I still don't really know until they start what the real work product is going to look like. And I can't guarantee that they're going to show up and provide the same value in the same way that I do. Right.
Mm.
So it's just harder, I think, with people to scale it beyond yourself. But there's pros and cons and challenges of every business model. That's just mine. And I think services in general.
Well, let's face it, as Gary Vee is saying, don't expect anybody to work harder than you as
Nope,
an
right.
entrepreneur. So
Nobody's gonna
that's
care like you do.
oh, absolutely. And but then on the other hand, some entrepreneurs talk about having people smarter than yourself. However, for a small business, I think it's quite difficult with a limited budget, is it?
Right, exactly.
Mm. So you talked about learning mistakes. I love that phrase. So learning mistakes. Was it some people that just put you down? I mean, like you expected the best of them. They were so well prepared for that interview, and then it transpired that they did nothing in the office.
I don't want to say that because I don't feel like that's fair, but but I think that there's a couple things, right? One is I'm a startup serving startups as my clientele. And so that's inherently chaotic. It just is, right? Like, we're still building the ship while we're flying it at my own company. And then my clients are building the ship while they're flying it. And things change rapidly, as I'm sure you well know, because you talk to a lot of startups and entrepreneurs. Um, so I think just like the rate of change is challenging. Again, especially when it's like change on change. I think the other thing that makes it challenging is, again, startups are just more volatile. It's not big enterprises with budgets that are more stable. It's like the budgets can come and go. If they lose one big client, that could be 30% of their revenue. So there's just a lot of unknowns and unpredictable, volatile change in the type of customer that I serve. Um, and then I would say, like, the thing that I think I underestimated is the challenge of switching costs, or like the challenge of switching, meaning we're always serving more than one client. So every person that works on my team will have to work on more than one client. And that means that you might be in the morning working on a fintech that sells to capital markets, and in the evening working on a healthcare company that sells to cardiologists. And that's a pretty big mental shift, right? For someone to like change gears and provide the same level of service. And I think that's something I've been doing my whole career, is like a lot of gear changing. And so I don't find it, maybe I shouldn't say I don't find it challenging, but I've become accustomed to it. But I think I underestimated how challenging that would be for other people. So I think if I go back in time, or if I try to hire people again at scale, I think I would look for folks that had agency experience in particular, meaning they were already used to working on multiple clients at the same time. Um, and then I think a lot of people joined my company thinking this was a really exciting opportunity. And it is. It's really fun working with these startups. But it's a lot of work. And I think they underestimated sometimes like how much work was involved. And like when you're a team of 3 or 5 people, like each of you make up 30, 10 to 30 or whatever, 20 to 30% of the overall company, right? So each person's contribution is pretty impactful. Whereas like when you're 100-person company, right, your individual impact is a little bit less from a percentage standpoint. So I think just some of them maybe underestimated what was going to be expected, and that's just
That's
learning, growing. Yeah.
yeah. That's part of the growing of the scaling your business,
Yep.
and you should know it best because you you helped scale some of the startups in your career. Now let's talk about your newsletter. So you provide a newsletter to your startups. Is it a solely idea of getting your word across or getting your SEO positioned, or is there something behind it?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer. I call it, just because I don't really like the term like growth hacks, because I feel like that's maybe sends the wrong message, like that growth is easy and there's an easy button, and that doesn't exist at all. There's no easy button. So the word I like instead of growth hacks is go to market multivitamins. So there are some things I think you can do, and podcast is one, like we were talking about earlier, where you have multiple benefits from that one marketing action. So my newsletter is one of those for me. It's a go-to-market multivitamin, in that I think it serves a few purposes. One, it helps with awareness, because it does have SEO benefits, and I promote it on LinkedIn, and so I obtain new subscribers and like continue to grow my audience through the newsletter, and so that helps with like top of funnel. But then it also, because I'm providing services, and like I mentioned, I think people are less predictable than software. Um, I think for someone to hire me for 8 to 10 grand a month, they want to, if they don't know me already, they want to get to know me before you make that kind of investment. At least, again, for my startup clients, that's a lot of money every month. So the newsletter is a way for them to get to know me, how I think, to get value from me. I give away a lot of things for free, so to speak, like a lot of templates and advice and playbooks. And I do that intentionally so that they can see like, oh, wow, like I really like how she approaches growth, or I like how she thinks. So it's a way of me nurturing like middle and bottom of funnel opportunities as well. And then I consistently say to folks like, one of the reasons why you do marketing is to basically not let people forget you exist. And so the fact that I send it out every week is a way of me always kind of being top of mind, or being at least like in their peripheral view, and not leaving that peripheral view, which is really helpful for like and that's even true for like my referral partners. So like people that wouldn't become my client directly, but they see my newsletter every week. It's a way of me staying top of mind for them. So those are all the reasons why I think it's a good thing to do.
Great. And you talk about taking action rather than waiting for opportunity. Can you share a moment where you had to create an opportunity from nothing?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Create an opportunity from nothing. I mean, I guess most of my client engagements, honestly, like a lot of them, again, they're early stage companies. There's not much there. I'm kind of building everything from scratch. Um, I kind of take the same approach with every client, which maybe would be helpful to share, which is there's like, if we zoom out at like a 50,000 foot view, there's really like three ways that you can get leads, right? Or pipeline, which is cold outbound, like you go to them, you're referred in, or channel sales is sometimes what it's referred to. So like another third party refers you to the lead. And then the last way, again, 50,000 foot view, is inbound. And that when people come to you, that's as a result of your marketing efforts. So that could be like paid ads, SEO, however it is, like they've come to your website and they've self-subscribed or nominated themselves. So like there's those three ways, right, at the 50,000 foot view. The easiest way to get leads, meaning just like budget, time to do it, is doing cold outbound. But it's also the least effective, because when we're doing cold outbound, we don't know, the person doesn't know us. We don't know if we're reaching out at the right time. Cold outbound is really noisy, so we all get too much of it already. And so it tends to be like hard to stand out in that noisy environment. And yeah, it's just not, it's like the least effective type of way, like meaning if we were to get leads from it, they're our lowest probability to close in general. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's just, that's the statistics. And then referrals, or channel sales are like medium time and effort and budget, and medium, like much better than cold outbound, probability that they'll close, right? Because if you introduce me to a founder, presumably they trust you, and so you're a trusted advisor, and I kind of inherit that trust from that introduction. So it increases my odds of winning the business. And then the best type of lead, again, statistically, is an inbound lead. You see me on LinkedIn, you start following me, you really like what I have to say, and you're like, I think I want to hire her. And you go to my website and you fill out a lead form. Like that's super high intent, self-selection, raising your hand, giving me your email. So that's what we want to aim for. But driving inbound leads takes time and it takes money. And so I always try to balance, like, what can we do quickly to get, momentum right away, which is cold outbound. And then since that's not our best source of leads, I don't want us to be on the hamster wheel forever. So while we do that, that's cheap and easy to get running, let's simultaneously start building referral partnerships and marketing to drive inbound so that we're providing a more sustainable growth path long term. So that's always like the kind of way I approach client engagements, is cold outbound first and then the other two.
Well, it sounds quite complex, because I have to tell you that I've never had inbound lead, and even though I am on top of LinkedIn, and I'm trying to get my word across as much as possible, but I'm fighting against a lot of cold outbound and a lot of really bad marketers out there who are just sending me a cold proposal asking, when can we grab a call?
Hmm.
So I'm wondering, how do you build that inbound lead? How do you really encourage customers to approach you? Because it's a new business,
Hmm.
it's never been seen, it doesn't have that first referral. So maybe the idea is to offer something free of charge for starters, or
Hmm.
is there any strategy that you advise?
Yeah, for each business it's going to be slightly different, but you're definitely on the right track. It's adding value without asking for anything. So that's like my newsletter or my LinkedIn content. And that doesn't mean when I say like LinkedIn, you can post on LinkedIn and it can be more like self-promotional, right? Like I'm sure you've seen people do that. And then you can post on LinkedIn and it's just like truly helpful. Like, hey, here is the exact, you know, list of questions that I ask when I conduct a customer interview to write a case study. And this is the exact format I follow to write the case study. Like that's, you know, pure value, right? For someone on the receiving end is like, here's exactly what she does. She didn't ask me for any money. She's just sharing information that's helped her do XYZ task. So I think when you share that type of content, um, and and that could be again social media, that could be a newsletter, that definitely helps attract people to you for sure. Because they're thinking, wow, if this is what she gives away for free, I wonder what it is like working with her. That's kind of like the mentality that most people follow. Like there must be so much more value there if this is what she's giving away for free. Um, and then SEO is still a really helpful strategy for a lot of businesses. Again, it really depends. Like there's analysis that I do and that anyone in the marketing field would do to confirm if that would be an effective strategy for your business, like to see what search volume is like for certain topics, or to see what your competitors, like how are they getting web traffic? Is it coming from organic search? Like there's other ways that we can kind of validate that that's a viable strategy, but for a lot of businesses it still is. And so writing really valuable content that is optimized for search engines is a way to drive inbound. Other ways are webinars that add value where you get people to join, and again they're not like sales, like really forwardly salesy, but you learn about the company, maybe you see a demo, maybe you learn about the people, and then you get interest, and that drives leads. Paid search, of course, or like paid ads are a way to drive inbound. Um, Other PR, so like getting media placements, like, you know, if I was to be featured on Forbes.com, that would certainly help. You know, so like there's a lot of different tactics that you can explore, and which ones make sense are going to vary for each business.
So let's dive into referrals, because I think it's important, and as you mentioned, getting clients referring to others is really critical for companies' scale. Now, how do we ask clients for a referral without being too pushy? Because clients sometimes are busy and they don't have time to draft appraisal or draft even a word of encouragement to others.
Yeah. So I think there's a few ways to get referrals, right? One is definitely asking your customers, but the other is like creating strategic partnerships with other organizations. So let me answer your first question and then I'll maybe move on to the second. So as far as asking your customers, there was some statistic I saw recently, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like 90% of customers are willing to give you a referral, but only 10% of salespeople ask. So part of it is just asking, like, which is kind of crazy when you read those stats, right? Like a lot of people are actually very willing to give you referrals. It's just a lot of people don't ask. So the old saying, poor mouths don't get fed, or whatever it is. um, so ask for sure. But I would say, like, how you can improve your odds of getting a yes, or how you can improve your odds of them actually following through, are for you to do the research. So go to their LinkedIn and figure out who they actually first degree connections are, that are people that you want to get introduced to. Then you're not just blanketly asking, like, hey, can you send me referrals? You're saying, hey, I see you're connected to David Smith. David Smith looks like he's hiring for a salesperson. So that kind of leads me to believe that it might be a good time for him to speak with somebody like me. Do you know him well enough to make an introduction? If you do, I'd be so grateful. Like, then you're giving them, like, who I want to be introduced to, why, like, what's the context of the intro, because that's helpful to make it. And then as soon as they say, yeah, sure, of course, I say, perfect. Let me send you an email that you can just forward to David so that I can make your life easier. And then you write the email. Hey, following up on our conversation, thanks so much for your offer to introduce me to David Smith. As I mentioned, I saw he's hiring for a salesperson, so I thought it might be timely for us to talk. Would really appreciate it if he's interested in blah, blah, blah. Right. And then that person, literally, it's so easy, right? They just forward the email and say, hey, Jess asked me to introduce us. We work with her. We love working with her. Let me know if you're open to a chat. Right. So there's ways to do it that make it easy for the recipient that's doing you a favor. So definitely follow that. And then again, I would say, like, your customers are not the only people that can refer you into prospective customers. There's other organizations that you can align yourself with where there's mutually beneficial, but not competitive, like, synergies, right? So, like, an agency that I work with a lot is called Odie, and they're a brand agency. And I don't do brand personally. Like, I don't know, me or my company don't create a brand from scratch. I don't have brand designers. That's not my specialty. But I do need a client to have a strong brand to have an effective go-to-market. So, and Odie and I both focus on the same target customer. Like, we focus on the same early stage founder. So the two of us teaming up and working together on content, marketing, referrals is really effective because we both are talking to the same people. We don't compete with one another at all. And we can both promote one another to each other's client base and help each other grow. So I would also encourage everybody to look for opportunities like that. Like, what are other organizations that you can partner up with that sell to the same target audience and offer a complementary product or service?
So how does it work exactly? Apart from that, you get together, but how do you benefit from each other apart from getting the same client? How do you make sure that they don't just grab the client and never go back to you?
I mean, there's just got to be trust to some degree, right? But again, like, in that case, Odie doesn't do what I do. So even if they win a client and I don't, it's not because um, they took it. Like, they just provide a completely different service that I would never provide, and they don't provide the service I provide. So, like, there's just, we might not win every at bat together, but there's no stealing, I guess. But even when I've worked with other, like, partners where there might be, I guess, an opportunity like that, like, you do have to, there has to be a level of trust. And that's why it's important to get into partnerships with people that you do trust. And sometimes you live and learn. Like, sometimes you set up partnerships that they aren't mutually beneficial, and you realize that, and then, you kind of scratch that and move on. So I mean, that's just business, right? I'm sure we've all, it's just like making a hire that doesn't work out or bringing on a client that doesn't work out. Like, that's just, I guess, like, I think the standard risk of doing business. But how we both benefit is, like, it's, again, like I mentioned, it's such a stronger lead when I introduce someone to Odie, because the people I'm introducing already trust me and they trust my recommendation. So they are more likely to take a first meeting with Odie, more likely to buy Odie because they trust me. And so that trust kind of transfers with the introduction. So leads from me, in theory, are going to close at, like, a much higher conversion rate than if Odie does cold outbound, because those leads don't have any trust like I give them. So it's just much higher quality pipeline to get it from a partner.
Mm. Building partnership helps, and creating strategic partnership is part of your advice. Now,
Mhm.
one of the things you talk about is also storytelling, and I've seen some really blunt and boring pitches. So what can you tell us about how to create that story that sells?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in most cases, most founders have a really interesting story. Just like I can't think of actually one that I've worked with yet that doesn't, right? Meaning like if you're founding a company, there's something like that you're so passionate about that you're willing to risk it all, kind of, right? Like, because when we start a company, there's financial risk, there's legal risk, there's reputational risk. Like, so we really have to be bought into the problem we're solving. And usually we have some personal connection or tie to that story. And so, like, almost in every case, the founder has a story that you can leverage. So, like, to give you an example, one of my customers from last year, this gentleman has built a really successful FX operating system, basically. So, like, foreign exchange operating system. And he sells this, it's a software solution to banks and to MSBs and other fintechs. And he himself was working at an FX brokerage firm running operations. And he himself went to the market to find a software solution. And he found that the only solutions in the market were really built for large banks with really big budgets. And he knew that there was other customers like him out there that needed a solution that didn't have a big bank budget, and he couldn't find one really that was great. And so he's like, wow, there's an opportunity here. Like, and I've experienced and lived this pain firsthand. So I know exactly what these other companies are going for, and I can see that there's no viable solution in the market. So I'm going to build it. Like, so that is a really cool story right there, right? Like, he's lived and breathed this problem and went to market and couldn't find something. And so he built it. So I think almost every founder you talk to has something like that. And so it's just about like pulling it out of them and then telling it in a compelling way that connects with your target audience.
In a compelling way, but how about pitching? Because there are many startups that fail at the pitching stage when you've got limited time to tell your story and tell what's your startup about.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, like a lot of times you only have like a 30-minute discovery call or something initially, like a first sales call. So if it's a more complex sale where you may not be able to get through your whole story in that 30 minutes, what I've coached some other founders to do is record a short video, right? And that could be like literally 30 to 60 seconds, but like, hey, I'm Jessica. I was a former capital markets turned salesperson turned VC. This is why I built my business. This is the problem I look to solve. I know we're connecting tomorrow and we only have 30 minutes. So I wanted to send you a short note and kind of tell you my story. And I've also attached a PDF or whatever overview of kind of how I approach client engagements. Wanted you to have this in advance so we can make the most of our time together tomorrow. Looking forward to it. So, like a short video or some like assets that you can share with a prospective customer before the sales call can be really helpful because it gives them all that context, and like they can kind of read through and come in prepared, and you can kind of jump right into the meat of the conversation and skip some of the fluff. But you don't lose the value of telling the story and getting the information out there. So that's sometimes like a tactic I've encouraged people to do. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Well, it helps. I was more thinking about, you talk about a unique value proposition, and
Mm,
that would I think would be a great strategy to include in your pitch. And
100%.
really, yeah, good. Well, let's talk about startups. You've been mentoring startups. So, what is the most common question you get from startups?
I think it's like just most of them feel, especially because a lot of my customers are venture backed, so there's a lot of pressure to scale and do it quickly. And again, not a big budget to do that either. So I think a lot of them are just like, I know I need to make more money. I know I need more pipeline. I know I need to do it fast. I know I need to do it efficiently. What the heck does that look like? Like where should I start? Because there are 20 different things they could do. Like, how do they figure out what are the 5 things that are going to add the most impact and not break the bank? And so I think like just getting down to like getting them comfortable with these are the 5 things we're going to do, and this is why, like based on this data or this research or um, this thing that I know about your target audience, like this is why we're going to take this path, and this is how we're going to do it. I think that's what most founders are looking for. It's like they know their product, they know their target customer. They just don't know when there's 20 options. And again, a very limited budget and a small team, which 5 are really going to move the needle. And like, then it's a matter of like, how are we going to do it?
And how often do you meet these startups?
So for me personally, I start all my client engagements off with a go-to-market audit, which is like a 30-day process of me really getting to know their business, their current state, their goals, me doing my own independent market research. Because I often say, like, I hope a doctor wouldn't give you a prescription without an exam. Like, I also don't want to walk in and tell you what to do before I really give you an exam. So, like, that first 30 days is my exam. And that's also like a nice get to know you period, like where the startup doesn't have to commit to like some long-term contract with me or spend there's an expense, but it's not like a massive expense. So it's a way to kind of try before you buy, so to speak. And at the end of that audit, I present based on everything I learned. Here's what I would recommend we do in the next 30, 60, 90 days. Here's why. Um, if you want to move forward with me, then we'll move to execution mode. And for what I need to do for you, it's going to cost X. And I think we probably have about 6 months of work together to achieve what I've outlined. So that kind of helps me scope in terms of like how much capacity I need to commit and how long the project might take. And then we move into execution mode. So once we're in execution mode, I would say like I'm very embedded in most of my clients. Like we're on Slack or Teams. We have weekly or more than once a week calls. So we're like communicating synchronously on those standing calls and then asynchronously through Slack and email and such. So I think if you asked most of my clients, they would say like when Jess was working with us, it was just like she was another member of our team, just with a very, defined set of priorities and goals. But yeah, so I talk to them a lot.
What do you learn from them? Is there anything that they surprised you, and now you learn something new from them?
I learn every day. It's funny you asked this question too, because I was just thinking about this yesterday for some reason, but like in terms of my own content development, like, but I truly do learn from every single one of my clients, which is amazing. So like, I'll give you an example. Like one founder I worked with, the way that he ran meetings was just so effective and awesome. Like he had this very like specific cadence that he would follow, where like the first 5 minutes of every meeting, what he called it the segue, and it was like for the small talk or whatever, but he literally had a timer going and he's like, okay, 5 minutes is up, now we're on to the agenda. And so like he would leave time for that human element in calls, but I just really liked how he time boxed it, and everyone knew that that was his style, and so it was just like broadly accepted. And every meeting had a very clear agenda, and he had like a way of cascading information through his organization really well. And so that was just like something I observed like from a founder, I guess like a way he operates, like that was really cool. And then another founder, I remember like the way that he had structured his ICP defined, like the way he had defined it and like structured it, just like the architecture of it was a way that I had never personally done it before, but I thought it was really cool. And I've leveraged that same kind of methodology in future engagements. So I think that's one of the really cool things about being a consultant is that you do get a front row seat to so many founders doing things in unique and different ways. And you can kind of, you can learn, like as much as I'm teaching them, they're teaching me too, whether they know it or not. And so I feel like we're both learning and growing, and it's cool to be able to take my learnings from certain client engagements and feed them into others.
So, through that 30-day process, how many clients stay with you? Is it like a percentage, or is everybody staying with you for the next 6 months?
Yeah, I would say like I haven't actually run the numbers, but if I had to guess, it was like 90 or 95% have moved on from the audit to a full-time engagement.
So,
Um,
would you say it's a effective strategy of go to market, just offering 30-day audit of whatever services you may offer?
I think and just in general, I believe like I call that like a wedge. So I encourage other companies too. Like, what can you find as a wedge product for what you do? Where it's like, another way to think about it maybe is like a pilot, right? Or a trial or something. So that can look different for every business. But yeah, finding a low cost way for people to interact with you or either you as a person if you're selling services or your software if you're selling software. So, like a 30-day free trial would be an example, right? Giving people a way to interact and really like understand the value in an either free or low cost way is definitely an effective way of converting customers because you're de-risking it.
Hmm. Excellent. So, we talked a lot about startups, about go to market, about marketing and sales processes. Now, what would you say is your strategy for problem solving?
Um, I'm very much assess, like gather all the facts, like what's going on now, and then build a plan and then execute. So it's always like assess, plan, execute, I guess is the way I approach any problem solving. Yeah,
So, assess, plan, execute. And if your go to market strategy is not working, would that be also a good problem solving for your go to market strategy?
totally. And I mean, it's more complicated maybe than we can cover in the time we have left. But yes, like in general, that's a good way to go about it. There's just like, you have to know what to assess to fix that.
And how often would you assess?
For go to market, I think it's really happening every day. Like I do think it's an evergreen activity, but I would say you want to formally sit down and do it as an early stage company, probably quarterly. And it's not like it's a massive, but just like a quarterly business review, like what did we win last quarter? What did we lose? Why did we win? Why did we lose? Like a win-loss analysis. Um, as well as like looking at some basic metrics like how's certain content performing, how are our deals moving through the funnel, like what do our conversion rates look like. So I think you want to do that quarterly and really feed that back into your strategy because again startups are fast moving and early stage companies, so I think it needs to be done more frequently. Whereas like the bigger you get, I think your strategy is more fixed for a longer period of time because you have more historical data to inform the strategy. So maybe like a larger company would only do that like semi-annually or annually or something like that.
Just as a female founder, I'm sure you appreciate the fact that there are not that many female founders. Is there a difference between female founders versus male founders started startups?
Um, yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with many female and male founders and I would say in general, like women are a little bit more empathetic and like take a little bit more, um, yeah, empathetic approach and they're very intuitive. But I wouldn't say that that's not a quality that I see in men either. I like how I've seen the world evolving lately, where we're talking about it more in terms of like feminine and masculine, because I think it's important to have feminine traits and masculine traits, whether you're a woman or a man. And so I think having a balanced, like feminine and masculine approach to business is really important. And I definitely have seen men excel at having like more feminine qualities in business. And I think as your show and your mission is to drive more diversity. I think like the more diverse teams that people have, the more that's um, possible, right? So like I think like the most successful teams that I've seen are founders that build a diverse, founders themselves that build a diverse team.
Excellent. Diversity wins. And now let's talk about women. As Eleanor Roosevelt once said, women are like tea bags. You never know their
Yeah.
true strength until you put them in hot water. So, Jess, in life, how are you in hot water? How are you brewing?
Um, I feel grateful that right now I don't feel like I'm in hot water, but I have felt like it many times in my life. And I think probably like most women, right? Like somehow we just get through things even when you don't think you can. But every time you do, it gives you more confidence to get through the next hard thing. So I think um, that's at least for me, like when I'm having a moment of self-doubt or feeling powerless or something, I'll try to think back, like kind of check myself. I'm like, okay, when's another time that you felt like this and you got to the other side? And usually I can think of something, and then I'm like, so you can do it again. And so I think it's just reminding yourself that you can
You very mellow tea
right now. We have
right
to
now.
appreciate those moments, you know?
Absolutely. So, what's planned for 2025? It's January and almost over, and I'm wondering if there's any exciting project for Jess.
Yeah, something I'm really passionate about still is that I believe in this business model, like the fractional leadership, like fractional go-to-market leadership. It's so valuable to these companies that I work with, and it's a really great career path for me. So it's like such a win-win for the consultant and for the business. And I truly believe there's more demand for it than there is supply. And so I would love to change to be helpful in changing that. And especially with the economic climate being what it is right now, like we've seen tons of layoffs and they don't seem to be stopping. So I think there's a lot of really talented sales and marketing people out there right now that are not able to find full-time employment. And this could be a really great either interim solution or maybe just a different path for them to consider. And I want to make that more possible for folks. Originally, I was trying to do that by hiring people, to work for me. I didn't find that to be effective, like I mentioned earlier in the call. So my new idea is to try to coach. So I'm offering executive coaching to folks that want to become a fractional leader or that are already starting to do it, but maybe they haven't found their groove yet in terms of like scalability and repeatability. And so my hope is that I can coach more people to be successful to build up the supply side, and then maybe one day that becomes, a community or a marketplace, or I don't know, TBD on the bigger picture. But for now, my goal is just to try to elevate more people in this profession.
Beautiful. We like more elevated people, people who believe in their power, who believe in they can pivot at any stage of their career. So, Jessica, what is the number one book you can sit and think, oh, I wish I read it before I started my pivoting journey?
One of the most impactful books for me in the last few years has been Be by Jessica Zweig, and it's about personal branding and kind of like getting more comfortable being you and that your authentic voice is enough and it needs to be heard. And it was just an amazing book for me to read, and I think it made me feel more comfortable being just my authentic self, if that makes sense, in my sales and marketing, instead of like what I thought people wanted me to be or something like that. So I really, really loved that book, and it's something I've, injected into every bit of my own sales and marketing with a lot of success. And then I love anything by Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist. I'm sure people have heard of him, but all of his books have been really helpful for me, just better understanding people and people dynamics. And yeah, I love his books.
Let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world and have a private breakfast anywhere in the world. Who would you invite and where would you go to?
I said my brother, he sadly passed away about 12 years ago, and we were really close. And so I would love to have breakfast with him. And I think we would go to the beach because that's like my most serene place myself.
I'm sorry about to hear about your brother passing. So, why would you want to meet with him? Is there some unanswered questions you have?
Um, Not necessarily. He was kind of, even though he was my younger brother, he was wise beyond his years in many ways. And he was very charismatic and very, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like lighthearted. So I think it would just be a really uplifting conversation, like to talk to him and like a feel good.
Excellent. Thank you, Jess, for sharing that part of your life. My mom passed away last year. It's going to be a first anniversary of her passing. And I have to say that conversations with my mom, even though she passed, is a highlight of my days. Now, can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote and how did it change you?
Mm. Yeah, so one of my favorite quotes that I learned from a podcast, and I wish I could remember which one, but it was you can empathize but unsubscribe. And I find myself to be an empath, and sometimes um, I go too far, I think, to like try to understand why people are the way they are, and maybe I'm too understanding. I mean, anyway, it's good to understand people and to understand why people are the way they are, but it doesn't mean that if it's negatively impacting you that you need to keep it in your life. So I just really liked that saying, and I've it's something I repeat to myself regularly where I'm like, this isn't working with this person or whatever, and that's okay. I can empathize with why they are how they are, but I don't need that in my life either, and so it's also okay to unsubscribe.
Mm. If you're always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be, as Maya Angelou says. That's another quotation for today, dear friends and audience of our show. Just thank you so much for showing us kindness and empathy and talking about go-to-market strategy, and for this vision of having more people empowered at the table, at the fractional roles or at the leadership positions, because we definitely need more empathy in leadership positions. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Your work is not only transforming the digital landscape, but also paving the way for a more sustainable future. And that's it from episode 170 of PhD Livestream. Thanks to our lovely guest, Jess Schultz. To stay updated and ensure you never miss positivity hack delivered, you can subscribe and hit that button. Next week, we're gonna talk with Raya Kandalan, and the topic's gonna be AI. No, we did not have episode about AI for 2 months now, so it's time for another episode. As always, our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only and goes, look for something positive each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. Finally, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Or, as our guest today said, unsubscribe. Today is your day to hack the future, hack the positivity you want. Thank you.